question about the critique that you just had for Tim Walz. Could we levy the same type of critique to Donald Trump, who avoided service with medical deferments, claiming bone spurs?
Oh, okay. So what are you going to argue that with Joe Biden?
No, because
Joe Biden's not
Joe
Biden had 5 deferments.
But hang on. Sergeant.
No, but Joe Biden is your current president. That the people. No. Okay, so he's not running.
Yeah,
but Donald Trump did not betray his troops.
You must control your temper.
You know, folks, in an earlier episode.
Oh, super excited to be here. Thank you so much for this fabulous introduction. Thank you.
So yesterday, big announcement coming from Kamala Harris that Tim Walz is going to be her vice presidential pick. Your initial reactions?
Oh, gee, I can't say that on the air. It was like, wow. the mindset, WTH, I was like, you got to be kidding. But I was thrilled because nonetheless, it proved how extreme Kamala Harris is. It essentially demonstrates that her far left policies, she didn't want to have a moderate choice. She didn't want to have somebody that could pull her more center. No, she went with somebody who is literally probably as extreme, if not more so than hers. I have such a long list of defaultive decisions that this man as a governor has made, that it demonstrates that Kamala Harris wants extremism. I mean, she now can't run from her own record because she's only getting it reinforced by the guy that pretty much enforces her record. One of the issues that came out, and you had mentioned it in the teaser, was that he has lied about his military service. The sergeant majors of the National Guard out of Minnesota had essentially published a letter how he had claimed that he was the most senior enlisted to ever serve in Congress. And essentially, he had lied about his rank. He had been essentially appointed to be a sergeant major, but never completed the course. And once his unit was going to be deployed to Iraq, this is no joke. This is written in stone. He had decided that he would submit retirement papers so he could run for office. And he had essentially told his soldiers that he would deploy with them to Iraq. Then he no-showed, did not come back. He did not even show up for discharge. They had never seen anything like this before. And they had to sign the paperwork for him and reduce him in rank. So he did not retire as a sergeant major because he never completed the qualifications to be the sergeant major, and turned around and retired a master sergeant. So when he has been on stage and says he wanted to ban weapons that he used in war is a flagrant lie. He had never served in a combatant situation, let alone in a war. And not only that, he did not retire a sergeant major in the United States National Guard. So, that right there for veterans is horrifically disgusting, and many people may not fully grasp how severe this is to those who have served. I can only say that if your senior leader, a sergeant major at that point in his career, tells you he's going to be somewhere and the troops are expecting him to be somewhere and then he just no-shows, this is an astronomic failure to any unit cohesion, to morale, and all of those that are scared and worried about their spouses being left behind now have a leader that cowardly ducked away. And many, many Marines that I know personally sacrificed everything to go with their units. Many lost their families as a result, divorce. Many came back seriously injured. But to be told you cannot deploy with your unit was such a slap in the face for many Marines and soldiers, for that matter, that go into these heavy combatant situations. Their honor is based upon the fact that they wanted to be with their unit. It is a cohesion, a band of brothers. It is something that most civilians can never really relate to, maybe except outside of the police force, that you have each other's back. And so this has really exploded in Twitter world with the veterans that have told their own personal stories, many who have blasted him. So here we have J.D. Vance. Your question is, will we be better off with J.D. Vance and President Trump? I just would like to have the comparables side by side of J.D. Vance along with this governor. J.D. Vance volunteered to serve and go into combat. One fled from service and combat. That is really the actual fact of the matter. I want a leader that's fearless, and we already have seen with President Trump that he is fearless everywhere, from them trying to bankrupt him, to remove him from the ballots in several states, from taking him with these ridiculous charges that have been so exaggerated that they've had to do a Gumby twist to try to make felony charges out of things that have been normally, if at best, a misdemeanor with bookkeeping, but turn around and try to make things more extreme than what they are to keep him off of this ballot. Jack Smith, along with Fani Willis's case, along with Coangelo out of the Department of Justice, all three of those cases got launched, I kid you not, 3 days after Donald Trump announced for president. He was going to run for president on November 15th. Nathan Wade went to the White House for a meeting. Coangelo was appointed, went up from Department of Justice to go to New York to support the case up there with Alvin Bragg. And Jack Smith was appointed to become special counsel, which of course now has been thrown to the wolves because Judge Cannon has said he was not appointed by Congress. So this all happened 3 days after the announcement. So it was quite obvious that it was strategic and a launch by this White House to keep him, the Biden-Harris White House, mind you, to keep him from running for president.
Now, Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Jane Duff, the question about the critique that you just had for Tim Walz. Could we levy the same type of critique to Donald Trump, who avoided service with medical deferments, claiming bone spurs?
Oh, okay. So what are you going to argue that with Joe Biden?
No, because
Joe Biden's not
running.
Joe Biden had 5 deferments.
But hang on. Sergeant.
No, but Joe Biden is your current president that the people.
No.
Okay, so he's not running.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump did not betray his troops.
Hang on.
Yeah, we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay,
Wait.
Let me answer you.
Let me answer you. I need to refocus the question. Okay, fine, but I need to refocus it.
Would you like me to answer the question?
I would like you to.
Would you like me to answer the question?
Can you focus?
Would you like me to answer the question?
Can you please focus on the current candidates?
Would you like me to answer the question? Yes or no?
You didn't at first.
Yes.
Please attempt.
That's not what I asked you. Would you like me to answer the question?
I just gave you an answer.
Sir,
Jesse.
would you like me to answer the question? Say yes or no. You can berate me and keep going about Joe Biden. We're talking about Donald Trump. Would you like me to answer the question? Yes or no, without a rebuttal.
I wasn't about it.
Thank you. Joe, oh, yes, it is. You kind of filibustered your whole question there. But here we have, yes, you did. Donald Trump was never in service and betrayed his troops. He was never on active duty. He had never volunteered to serve. He was not serving over 20 some odd years on active duty, being directed to go do something. And I can tell you, almost every single one of us has known somebody, a relative of ours, I have 2 of them, as a matter of fact, who had deferments from going to Vietnam. So we can split hairs on deferments from going to Vietnam that medical doctors had decided was appropriate. Okay, we can split hairs on that, but I've got 2 brother-in-laws that did not serve in Vietnam for medical deferments. Okay, so many people have had medical deferments, but they did not betray their unit. They did not decide to relinquish their service. They did not tell their troops that they would show up and walk away. So I can give my brother-in-laws, I can give Donald Trump, and I can give Joe Biden the same thing because they received that from medical professionals. And that is legitimate. That is actually legitimate. I can't tell you, as a United States Marine Corps, in the 20 years that I served as a recruiter for 3 years, and I saw many young men try to volunteer to serve and were no longer able to serve for things like flat feet. And many of them were devastated for it. So you want to criticize a bone spur. I do know for a fact that I've had Marines that could no longer serve because they had blood in their urine when they took their urinalysis and they were deferred from being able to serve. There are things that simple that keep people from serving. It is nothing to mock when people are told they cannot serve, because the military is not meant to be a medical rehabilitation service where if something is wrong with you, then if you come back maybe years later and the problem has resolved itself, then potentially you can serve, but that is permanently on their record, and many people cannot overcome the medical deferment that they've already received. You cannot join the military with childhood asthma. So you're going to nitpick over somebody's medical deferment? I guarantee every single one of us, most of the listeners, probably know somebody who got deferred from Vietnam for a medical reason, not because they ran from their troops.
Okay, Sergeant. But the issue being that Donald Trump didn't show up at the recruiting office and get bounced out because of bone spurs. He sought that diagnosis beforehand. He sought the diagnosis beforehand. So what?
But he did not betray. I answered your question. If you want to berate this and go on and on about Donald Trump,
do I get to answer on my own show or not?
Donald Trump has served this country for over 4 years. I already answered your question.
I know, but I was
don't come on
responding.
the
I
show
don't
to
get
get
answer it?
berated. I do not come on the show to get berated. So
asking
if
you
you want me to
questions.
answer questions,
Fine.
I already answered
Fine.
your question.
If this is too difficult for
I
you,
already
I will be
answered
quiet.
your question.
Fine, I'll be quiet. If this is too hard for you,
It's
I'm going
not
to
too
be quiet.
difficult.
It is too hard.
No,
It
it's
is much
not
too
too
hard for you.
difficult for me at all.
Yes,
It
it
is not
is.
All right.
difficult for me. You just want to berate somebody
No.
over the fact that Donald Trump didn't serve the country when he's already been president of the United States. We had less taxes. We did not have the high rate of
You're running a
inflation.
field.
You want to go back?
Not
You
dealing
want
with
to
the
go
issue.
back to Vietnam to degrade
You're running in
Donald
the
Trump
field.
when he's
You're just
already
running all
served
over
as
the place.
president? I'm not running the
Yes,
field.
you
You
are.
just don't
Bill-
like the fact that he
Bill-
was an exceptional president. Nobody
right,
comes on this show to get berated by the host. You can filibuster me when I get off the air and tell all of your listeners that you don't appreciate me supporting Donald Trump. But I am the executive director of Veterans for Trump, and you already knew that when you booked me. And
With
I can
respect,
give
you
you
obviously don't listen to the show.
5,000 reasons,
It's fine.
and I can give you reasons in which Donald Trump was a successful president. And I don't think anybody's talking about Vietnam service right now.
Yeah, and I
because
know you
they
don't
know
listen to the
that
show.
their taxes were lower. They know that the inflation rate was lower. They know unemployment was lower because
None
right
of which
now
I was
it's
talking about. That's okay.
skyrocketing. They also know that,
Go right
well,
ahead.
I'm talking about it. That's
I
why I was
know.
invited on this show. And we also know that the
You were invited for
inflation
a
never
conversation, but
skyrocketed to 9%.
okay.
And for those who served in the military, they know that we are on the verge of how many wars right now. We have funneled money over to Iran, which was bankrupt under Joe Biden, which was bankrupt under President Trump. And now Joe Biden has enabled, the Biden-Harris administration has inflamed the world with what we're looking at of potential wars. That impacts, guess who? The military. But if you want to go back to Vietnam service, nobody's voting on that issue, and you know that. You know that. Nobody's going to vote on that issue.
Who's
But
berating
somebody
who?
who
Okay, hold on.
decided to
Who's
betray
berating who?
his troops
Who's berating
recently,
who? I'm not saying a thing.
Hold
and
on.
who's
Let
berating
me
who?
reset
I'm the
here.
guest,
Okay.
and you want to come at me with an attack, and you think I'm not going to defend myself? I certainly shall.
She is a Marine. Jessie Jane
attack.
Duff. She's a gunnery
Sorry, I took it
sergeant
that
and
way.
executive director
Don't listen to the
of
show.
Veterans for Trump. Jesse, this is the format of the show is a little bit like the old Hannity and Combs. So I'm the more conservative, and Billy's the more independent thinking.
Well, he's living in
co-host
the
on
past
show.
of Vietnam, of course. He wants to go back out there. So let's go after everybody who got a deferment from Vietnam.
So
Is it-
I-
is it-
I-
but
that's
Walz,
just such a
Walz
weak
service is in the
argument.
past again.
That is such a
Walz
weak
service is in the
argument.
past
Such
as well.
a weak argument.
Okay, you
That
went.
is
You went.
such a weak
You were the one that
argument.
went back to Walz military service. I'm sorry that I followed you. I'm sorry that I followed your lead.
No, Walz
God
is,
forgive me
I'm
for
sorry,
following
Iraq
the
was
line
how
of
long ago?
questioning.
This is a
Oh,
current
yes.
issue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
He did stolen valor. He's claimed that he retired as a sergeant major, which he did not do. That is called stolen valor. And Iraq was not decades ago. Iraq is something that J.D. Vance served in. I served during. And guess what else?
It is in the
Donald
past.
Trump was the commander in chief that helped evacuate these troops and made sure that we did not have endless wars. So, that is a current issue for most of
Who's
Americans
berating
right now,
who?
because most of us remember where we were on 9/11. You want to quickly go back. You know what? You're kind of like snide. I wouldn't even call it Hannity and Combs because you know what? Combs actually was kind of respectful. He wasn't somebody that made the sarcastic comebacks when somebody said something that he didn't like. Your attitude is to degrade the guests to make sure that they're caught into a hole of defending something that isn't even an issue for American voters. Why don't you talk about Donald Trump's record? Because you can't. Because you can't.
Jesse, I do want to talk about. I want to talk about
Trump's record.
Afghanistan and what happened under Biden's leadership in Afghanistan, which was one of the saddest days in American history when. Under his leadership, we withdrew from Afghanistan. You had the people running towards the planes, and then you had the explosion that took place and killed 13 service members. You saw the Gold Star families at the RNC. When veterans look at a commander-in-chief, how do they feel about the Biden-Harris presidency, especially in light of the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle?
The enlightenment for many veterans has been wickedly painful. I personally was impacted by that, watching that happen. One of the Marines that was killed was from my hometown, Sergeant Nicole G. So on the day of that withdrawal, when we saw that there was an abject failure by not just the Biden administration, but the military personnel that did not push back on this withdrawal, that was absolute chaos. It was destructive. It destroyed morale, cohesion. Many veterans started committing suicide. They saw escalation of suicide because those that had served in Iraq and in Afghanistan felt that it was such a failure of all of the service that they had provided and all that they had sacrificed to go and try to support the United States in this mission, and to see it just collapse like that and have the Taliban come right back and take charge was just horrific. On that day, there were 11 Marines killed, a Navy corpsman, and a soldier. And the corpsman's mother was on the radio within a few days after that death of her son, and she had commented that her son had said to her, "Mom, I'm going to be okay. The Marines here protect me." And I know that, having been a Marine, we just loved our corpsman. We called them Doc. And he was, I believe, 19 years old, maybe 20. And she said when she found out her son died, she was crying on the call, but she said, I believe he felt he had to go with them because he was that close to those Marines, and he was killed in that explosion. We had a sniper that had testified in front of Congress that it was an abject failure of leadership that would not allow him to take out the suicide bomber. He had continually called it in to try to take the target, was not allowed. His leadership was not allowed. They were not allowed to take him out. And long story short, we all know what happened. The suicide bomber had gone off, and they had the 13 dead, over 45 that were severely wounded, that many are permanently disabled. And this was just catastrophic. It was like watching Keystone Cops to see that withdrawal, how the Biden administration had rushed it. The Biden-Harris administration, let's include her because she did say she was the last person in the room. She did indicate that she supported this mission. And the fact was it was done so chaotically that it was an embarrassment to the great credit of the United States Marine Corps and that of the soldiers and the corpsmen that were there. Because the fact is that we know how to do this better than that. As I recall, there had been a date set, and then they backed it up several days because they wanted to try to rush out. We left billions and billions of dollars of equipment over there. We gave up an air base that could have been of strategic importance to the United States, particularly with our difficulties with China. And we saw how many Afghanis and how many Americans get left behind, let alone killed, trying to flee. It was tragic, tragic beyond means.
I think the last time we had you on the show was probably before those Gold Star families at the RNC. And I think that was one of the most powerful evenings. I'm sure you were there watching that when they were talking about the fact that Biden and Harris never even said their names.
Have never said their names, never met with them privately. Donald Trump has met those families several times. The first time he met with them for hours. Several hours, just let them tell their stories, let them talk, let them grieve, let them cry. He met them again when we launched the Coalition for Veterans and Military Families for Trump on Memorial Day weekend, and he met with them again and let them talk. And so they see the compassion of him. He has been known to be an exceptionally compassionate man towards those who have suffered. There are many people that have gotten checks after they've died. The child has been suffering massive illness, and they've ensured that they've been able to be taken to the right healthcare facility for their cancer treatments. Many of these stories go untold, but I know personally that there have been people that have been impacted by his kindness and generosity to them, and he does it very quietly. He does not advertise it. So, those who dislike Donald Trump often have never met Donald Trump or have never been close enough to him to see that side of him. They only go off of maybe the clips or what they want to see on MSNBC or whatever the left-wing media wants to promote. I've actually met Donald Trump, and he listens to every single person in that room. I briefed Donald Trump in the Roosevelt Room. So I actually know for a fact that what he has done for this country has been from the heart of believing that what he has to do is so important for our great nation.
Talking with Jessie Jane Duff. She's a Gunnery Sergeant and Executive Director of Veterans for Trump. Jessie, I think what you're experiencing is what's going to be a central part of the next few months is Tim Walz's military service. How relevant is it? How important is it? How does it contrast with J.D. Vance? And I tell you, the Trump operation sure has a bulldog in the fight. You can give just as much as you can take. I appreciate you going back and forth with Billy, and the text messages are absolutely pouring in, and they appreciate you being as tough as you are. Jessie Jane, thanks so much for being on the Jeff and Bill Show.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Have a great day.
Hopefully you're more prepared next time.
Jeff and Bill, weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 710, KNUS.